Yo guys, what's going on? Robert Warshack here. We're going to be going over the best decks since the recent update. Quite a few of the most popular cards, looking at like stuff like Ziliax, got nerfed and a couple cards got buffed. However, there are a few decks that remained unchanged even though the card was changed, and that's going to be the Concierge Druid. This is still an OTK deck even though this was nerfed to 4 mana instead of 3 and the Chia Drake went to a 2/4 instead of a 2/5. The deck still basically just became more refined, more people playing it. Even though it no longer can OTK you maybe on turn 4 or 5, now it can just kill you on turn 6 or 7. And again, that combo is the cards from another class cost 1 less. Of course, you run the 1 mana mage spell, you run the other 1 mana mage spell, the Sea Breeze Chalice, which deals 2 damage, randomly split among all enemies. It has 3 charges to it. You go ahead and you make spell power with like the Dollhouse, the Go with the Flow, or your Chia Drake, making up to 4 or 5 spell power. So each what would be 0 mana of Concierge out does 5 damage. You play it 3 times because it has 3 charges. You have 2 of them, which is just 30 damage right there. You have Pupil, which can bring back the copy, which has 3 charges as well. And then on top of that, if that wasn't enough, the deck obviously runs Swipes, which is a lot of damage. It runs Toy Chest, which can copy any of the spell damage. And then it also runs the Messiah, which is in 3 turns, replay every spell you've cast between now and then. So if you cast like 5, 6, 7, 8 chalices, it's going to recast them. All of them are going to go back to your hand because they have charges left, and then your opponent's going to do that whole combo over to you again. So not only does this deck have the dragon package, which allows them to get on the board early and have a decent amount of ramp with 3 mana 3/2s that give you mana crystals, 1 mana 3/2s. So have a ton of draw with Take to the Skies. So they always have their dragons, which means they always have their spell power. They have 0 mana 3/4s, and then they have a massive amount of draw with like Sleep Under the Stars, which is choose 3 times, draw 2, gain 3 mana crystals, or gain 5 armor. So this deck really strong right now. It's really tough to beat it. If you're playing any sort of control deck, I'm sure you've queued into this. It's not fun. And yeah, really powerful deck. It has a tough time against other aggro decks, but even then, the swipe with the spell power is just really strong against other board-centric aggro decks. So the Concierge Druid still looking as good as ever, even though a couple cards did get changed. It's still very solid. For those of you who do like Druid but don't want to play an OTK deck, you can still go with the old sort of dragon ramp Druid. Instead of the Concierge OTK package in this, we run the like very large minions like Eleanor, we run the Ziliax, Unkiliax, Yogg, with the Hydration Station, Martin, the Doomkins with the Puppet Master. So you guys know you get the Puppet Master out because you ramp like crazy, because you have stuff like the Chia Drake still in the deck and the Split Splash with New Heights, so you can go crazy, probably get to 10 mana before your opponent even gets to 3. You play Puppet Master, you play Summer Child. This is going to draw more Doomkins, or your Eleanor. You're going to play Eleanor for 1 mana, you're going to refresh your mana crystals, and you're just going to go crazy again. This deck pop-off turns are crazy. However, it is kind of weak to decks with AoE because once you clear the board a couple times, this deck does run out of steam. But that's kind of like, you stop your opponent from getting mana with Doomkin, and you ramp so much that like even if they have 1 or 2 removal spells, you're so far ahead and have done so much damage that it doesn't really matter. Also, you just play Hydration Station and resummon your Ziliax or your Fae and stuff like that. So like you have quite a few boards in this deck that are very strong, and the deck is quite nice. It's really fun if you like any sort of ramp Druid. Moving towards the Evolved Shaman, pretty popular, gaining a lot of steam since the update. This deck revolves around the wave of nostalgia, which is transform all minions into random legendary ones from the past. It has a ton of stuff to get on the board early, with stuff like the Grofin, which is you basically get 2 minions out of a 1/1. Patches, which gives you a bunch of cards. Pop-up Book gives you a bunch of cards. Cactus Clutter draws you a bunch of cards. Sigil of Skydiving is 3 minions that would charge inside of a 2 mana card that procs at the end of the beginning of your next turn, so those minions get to live. We have Carefree Cookie, which anytime something dies, it comes back as 1 mana cost higher, which is quite annoying if you get this out and start trading. We got the Gorgonzola Trees. We got the Gorgonzola Cheese, which fits perfect in this deck. It's a battle cry. Get a 2 cost cheese that summons 3 1-cost minions, and it upgrades every turn, meaning every turn it'll 2 cost, 3 cost, 4 cost. The minions just get better. There's some key spots. 4 mana minions are generally good. 6 mana minions are generally good. 8 mana minions are generally good. So those are some good breakpoints. You have the Totem Carver, which again gains an extra effect when it's in your hand, which is summoning more stuff. Backstage Bouncer, a lot of stats for early in the game, especially if you're hitting a totem or like a 0/3 frog or something like that. Transform a friendly minion into a copy of this. And then, of course, you have 2 Sea Giants with the Ziliac that your other minions have +1 and +1 and cost less for each friendly minion. This deck aims to get on the board fast and hard and evolve and then go crazy. Pretty fun deck. If you like Evolved Shaman in the past, it's going to feel very, very similar to that. We have a new deck on the block, Razzle Dazzle decks. So a lot of people are trying out the Razzle Dazzler, whether it's Shaman or Death Knight. Death Knight will be after this, but this card used to cost 7 mana. It went down to 6 mana. A 6 mana 4/4 that battle cry, summon a random 5-cost minion, repeat for each spell school you've cast this game. As we know, Shaman has a lot of different spell schools to cast from because it Shaman, and then the Death Knight has the new Taurus card, which allows you to put Shaman cards in the Death Knight deck, so you're able to get quite a few spell schools that way. However, what makes this deck slightly different from the Death Knight one is the fact that you do have quite a few combos with like Hagatha, which is draw 2 spells that cost 5 or more, transform them into slimes. You run the Wish Upon a Star, which is going to buff all the minions that you summon. After you go Razzle Dazzler, you run the Shudder because it's really, really good. You also have Skirting Death, which is a shadow card. Choose a minion this turn. Your hero steals 4 attack from it, which you can combine with Horn of the Windlord, so you can do a ton of bursts that way. Of course, like the previous deck that's very board-centric, we run the Cheese. You want a bunch of minions. We want to evolve them, and the early game is going to look very similar to that Evolve deck we just went over with Patches, which is really good. Pop-Up Book. Magma is just a fire spell that you can cast 3 times. Needle Rock, which is juicy draw, some armor. Sigil, we saw this before. Carefree Cookie, because minions stick it on the board, is good. We also run 2 natural talents because this card just got buffed. It's a 3 mana, get a random Naga and a random spell, and they cost 2 less. So you're getting 4 mana worth of discounts from this card, and it counts as a nature, along with the fact there's a lot of good Nagas right now. These Razzle decks are still being refined. They just popped up like literally when the update happened, so it's going to take probably a week until we get like an actual refined list and enough stats to be able to figure out what's good. These are the front runners at the moment for the Razzle Dazzle decks. Also, we have Fairy Tale Forest, which draws a Battlecry minion from your deck, which of course could be Shudder, it could be Razzle. There's a lot of really great options with that as well, and make sure you have your win condition card on the turn that you want it. Moving down to Razzle Dazzle Death Knight. This is Jamboree's list. He climbed from like 1200 legend to like, I think he said 300 legend with this list. So this is a more aggressive style of the Razzle Dazzle. It plays a lot of just get on the board quick. We got Horn, we got Down, which does damage and puts plagues in our opponent's deck, but we really only play it because it's a shadow card. Frost Strike is really good. Malted Magma just 1 because it counts as 3 cards and you can play it 3 times. It's also pretty easy to get when you have like Buttons, which is going to draw every spell school from your deck, so you really only need 1. You also run 2 natural talent, very similar to the Shaman deck. Nature card, get 2 random Nagas and add a random spell to your hand. Again, most of the time you're going to get something that you need to play in order to power up your Razzle Dazzler. From there, this is the only card in the deck that I don't really understand too much. This is Battlecry, reduce the cost of a spell in each school in your hand by 2. We don't really run that many spells, but the spells we run are mostly 2 mana, so I guess it makes sense. But this was the only card that I didn't really see being super powerful in the deck, but I didn't make the list. This is just a popular one going around. Horizon's Edge, there's a lot of little minions in this deck. We want to do a lot of damage fast, and this card, in my opinion, is just really good. If you have 2 Horizon's Edges out and you use all their durability, that's technically 30 damage between 2 locations that you can proc multiple times per turn. Mara Manipulator, love this in the deck. I have this in my version of both Frost DK and Razzle Dazzler. There's a lot of dead bodies. We have no corpse spenders, and it's a Pyroblast and a 6 mana 5/5 minion. I think this is a fantastic choice and a very fun card. Of course, we run the win condition, and then Reska, a lot of minions dying. We can go ahead and make her very cheap and then steal our opponent's stuff. This is going to be the more aggressive, very just in your face, low mana cost, summon as many minions as possible. My list, and what I've seen a lot of people play as well, is this rainbow sort of list that runs Goreblade, which is for the rest of your game, your minions have +1 attack, which includes any way you summon them, whether minions summon them, your hero power summons them. And then from there, we run stuff like Ghoul's Knight, which is summon 5 1/1 ghouls that attack random enemies. These turn into 2/1 ghouls, so it's basically like a Pyroblast. For our spells, we go with more Rune of the Darkness, get some weapons in there. We run Corpsicle because of all the corpses, and that's a Frost card as well. We run Frost Strike, which is nice. Again, just the 1 Malted Magma, and the Threads of Despair as our shadow card instead of the deal 3 damage, put the plagues in our opponent's deck. However, I also run Helia, just because she's a 4 mana, like just if they draw 1 or 2 plagues, she paid for herself off. If they didn't draw plagues, well, so be it. She's one of those cards that you can just put in. It's 1 slot, and like 5 or 10% of the time you'll win because of her, because your opponent will draw like a bunch of cards and they'll hit a bunch of plagues and then concede. You know what I mean? It's just one, it's a one card that you put in that can, like, it feels good. She just feels good. Of course, we run Horizon's Edge. We run the Razzle Dazzler. As a control player, I love the Prime, so of course I put Prime, and then Fresca is obviously just good in any sort of deck that runs a lot of minions. Also, we run Gorgonzola because we want a lot of minions to be summoned, and we keep putting stuff on the board, and ideally it has like +1 attack from the Gore Blade. You could as well put the hero in this deck, like the Death Knight Headless Horseman guy. That's fine as well. I've seen that being played. The key is when you add cards, you have to take stuff out, and I just don't know what to take out. But yeah, a lot of popular lists going around with this Rainbow Razzle Dazzle deck. And there's, again, it's going to take a few days to figure out the best version, but it is very, very popular right now. So moving to the only control deck that I've seen in this entire meta, and that's going to be Highlander Warrior, going back to its original state with the Deep Miner brand, the Bomb Boss, with the Hydration Station and Dr. Boom getting nerfed, so Ziliax can't summon a bunch of times. It only will summon one Ziliax back. It has to be different mechs. It's still really good. So we went back to the old Excavate package because you're still going to get Burrow Buster from Inventor Doom along with Ziliax, which is still good. And then your brand still really works with the Excavates because they work really quickly. And then when you play that, you're going to be able to create 4 8-mana cards, which are like Rag and Hellscream and Alakir and all that kind of shit. So even though the Hydration Station version is dead, Highlander Warrior still, who would have known that Battle Cries triggering twice is still really, really good. However, this is a control deck, and it is very weak to OTK decks, and there are quite a few OTK decks out there, which is why you're not seeing a lot of control decks appear right now. And if they are control decks, they're ramp decks like the Druid, which are like stealing mana from your opponent, or having these huge pop-off turns where there's so much stats on the board by like turn 6 or 7 that an OTK deck, if they haven't assembled their OTK, they just lose. There's no way in their deck to clear it all. So control's in a weird spot right now. It's hyper aggro or OTK, it seems like. This is in my opinion, one of the weirdest metas we've been in. Not one of my personal favorites, but there are a lot of different decks to play if you enjoy these style of decks. And so yeah, those are the best decks. Let me know what you think. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Of course, I'm Robert Warshack, and happy whatever the hell day it is.